Okay, so we are live. So croeso, welcome. Really good to see everyone here today. For people who don't know me, I'm Jack Sargeant, the member of the Senedd for Alyn and Deeside. And today we're here to have a chat about a UBI, a Universal Basic Income, for Wales. So before I go over to our exciting panel of experts and guest speakers, I wanted to say a little bit about what this event means to me and where this has come from. So many of you may have read. If not, can I encourage you to read maybe over the next few weeks? I wrote a piece, an opinion piece for Labour List, which was also published on the Institute for Welsh Affairs, and that piece generated quite a lot of interest, and it was focused on what I believe the bold policies that Welsh Labour, my party, should focus on in the next Senedd elections in May. Now, it obviously included universal basic income, and I'll go into what it included a little bit more as well. But I became interested in a UBI and a trial for a UBI, particularly in my constituency of Alyn and Deeside, because of the threat of an economic crash. And it's even more relevant now with the coronavirus pandemic. But I should say, we had this conversation in the chamber previously, and the reason behind that was automation and the ongoing search for artificial intelligence and implementing them in manufacturing. Now, I myself am a time-served apprentice engineer who's worked on the lines installing and developing these types of technologies. So I could see it firsthand that this was going to happen. I don't like the name robots. I prefer to call them cobots and use them as co-workers. So that's where the idea sort of started from, because Alyn and Deeside is the biggest manufacturing base in Wales, and it's going to be the hardest hit. There are studies out there for a few years now which says that. Obviously, since then, and as I just mentioned, it's ever has more relevance now, and even moving in a fast-paced environment, if you like, due to the crisis. We've obviously seen the sad announcements from the coronavirus pandemic that Airbus in my constituency have announced 1,700 jobs losses, and just over 1,400 of them are going to be from my area of Alyn and Deeside. And this is a business that affects so much more than themselves. The supply chain is huge. I believe it's between every one job in Airbus is 6 in the supply chain, but it goes a lot further in that. It goes to those jobs on Broughton Shopping Park and into the local economy as well. So that's just not Airbus, and it's just not my constituency, but that's where I like to see a trial happen. And one of the reasons is for that, we've been let down before in my area. We had the single biggest redundancy back in the Thatcher days at Shotton Steelworks, and we're still feeling the effects now. And I'm worried with the current policies and political choices that we're seeing at the moment, mixed with the pandemic, we could be in for a really, really rough and turbulent years time, and it would go on for a number of years. So what have I called for? I've called for a universal basic income trial, and as part of that, I'd like to see it married with a Green New Deal, and also a 4-day shorter working week. And I wouldn't tell businesses how to run that. That is up for the business, but I do believe they work in tandem, and I believe the universal basic income assists and gives people the opportunity who do work that shorter week, 4-day week, for example, to go and explore, use that extra day to do something different, be that springboard, go and speak to your neighbour, be that kind person that we've all become during this pandemic, or even retrain to go and do something that perhaps society has let you down and you haven't been able to do it before. For me, it addresses many issues. I've just spoke about some, but there is plenty more that it can address, and I don't want to take too much time up because I know I want to hear from the audience, but I also want to hear from our experts panel as well. So I will be pushing for a universal basic income trial. That's what I'm committed to doing. I can't do it alone. It's not my idea. I've said that quite openly. It isn't my idea. But I think if we work together, we have more of a chance of doing this. So I will pass over to my panel of experts now, because I am conscious of my time on this call and the reason that we're doing it. But I must say it's really great to see so much interest in this. We only set this call up a few weeks ago to get 30 people interested, and actually we've had more than that, but sadly we've had to cut it at the cut-off point at 30 people. But it's great to see so many people here, political staffers, organisations from right across Wales, and even people from my local community as well. So special thanks to them for joining on. So that'll do for me. I think it's time that we hear from my panel. As I said earlier, this will be going out onto YouTube. It is a recorded event. Please feel free to share it to those members of our communities once this is published. And also, if any questions would like to be asked following our expert panel and their time, please submit your name to the chat function, and I'll try and call as many people as possible during the question and answer session. So enough from me. If I would very kindly welcome our Future Generations Commissioner for Wales, Sophie Howe. Sophie, thank you for your time today. You're extremely busy, but we really appreciate your time. And I'll hand over to you to hear from you and your thoughts on a UBI for Wales, which I know you've called for.
Thank you, Jack. Diolch and pnawn da pawb. Thanks very much for having me today. So I wouldn't say that I'm an expert on universal basic income, but I do have a role and an interest in identifying things which or policies which I think are in the interests of future generations and which will help us to meet the 7 national wellbeing goals set out in the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act. So I guess the place that I'm coming from on this is trying to identify the things that we could do in Wales which have the best chance of making the biggest contribution to all aspects of our well-being, individual well-being, societal well-being, and of course planetary well-being. And I think that what we've seen during the COVID pandemic is that really that has kind of exposed a number of problems within our system. It's exposed a number of really ingrained inequalities. But in lots of ways, I think it's kind of just fast forwarded us really to where we might have been going in the future. And it's kind of, one day we weren't in lockdown, the next day we were, and it's really kind of fast forwarded that exposure of a number of these problems. So a lot of people, I think, talk about UBI in terms of job insecurity as a way of addressing that. And yes, I think that that's a really important element to consider. We have more workers working in the gig economy than ever before. The gig economy has doubled in size in the last 3 years. So many people in kind of precarious employment. Our current welfare system, and we've seen this through the new measures also that have been put in place to deal with COVID, isn't equipped. It wasn't designed to cope with people being in insecure employment, where they may be earning a fair amount one week or a lower amount one week, and the next week not be earning anything at all. So I think that these are challenges which are here and now, but they're likely to increase over the course of the next few years when automation, artificial intelligence and so on is likely to take up more of our work. I think the estimations are that it won't necessarily take away whole jobs, although some it may, but also it will kind of change the way that we work. So we will be working alongside robots, working alongside artificial intelligence and so on. And that may mean a reduction in working hours for people. And I think that that is actually no bad thing. And I'm with Jack in that I'm quite interested in a UBI aligned to a reduced working week. Because when you come to the wellbeing implications of that, I can envisage a world whereby we are able to work fewer hours. We are therefore, and we're supported to do that through a universal basic income. By working fewer hours, we're able to perhaps retain some of the good things that we've seen from this pandemic. So the fact that there's a bit of a slower way of life, the mass increase in people volunteering, that we'll be able perhaps to walk our kids to school rather than jump in our cars because we're kind of dashing to get to work by 9 o'clock and so on. we may need to, we could, take a slower pace of life, and a slower pace of life, not solely focused on how much money we can make, is a way of life that we're going to have to adopt if we're going to meet our commitments in terms of climate change and operate within planetary boundaries. And I think, it's so important for us to be considering those elements because of the future trends coming our way. So by 2036, we're going to have double the number of over 70s. So the pandemic has already exposed challenges in that caring, in terms of those caring responsibilities. What will it mean when we have those caring responsibilities? We're all still working 40 hours plus a week, and who is actually going to do the caring? I think a lot of those things, there can be a kind of community response, not taken away from public services, but public services are not going to be able to cope with that level of demand. And I think if we break down some of the traditional thinking around, the way that we do things at the moment, which is, we've got this demand coming, we have to fill it with a public service, and actually think, what is the whole societal response to this? And a whole societal response, I think, could be focused on us saying, actually, what we value is people having time to spend in their communities. Actually, what we value is people having time to spend, spending their money with local shops. Actually, what we value is people being able to care, having more time to care for children, older people, and so on. And what we value is a focus on people's mental well-being and physical well-being, which indeed all the studies on the UBI suggest is massively improved. So that's the kind of case that I'm making, thinking holistically about the benefits of UBI as a policy that could have a really promising implication across a number of areas of our well-being.
Thank you, Sophie. It was a very interesting points, which are very closely aligned to what I believe a UBI can do, especially within a societal response, and change perhaps what our traditional values were for the better of our mental well-being and our communities' well-being. So thank you for that. If I can introduce our next speaker, Dr. Sarah Gilmore from Cardiff University Business School, and you've been doing some research on the UBI with some of your colleagues, Sarah. Perhaps you'd like to tell us about that.
Thank you. Yes. As Jack said, I'm Sarah Gilmore. I'm a reader in organisation studies at the University of Cardiff Business School. And together with some colleagues at Exeter University, where I used to work, we've been looking at UBI for the past 3 years, mainly sort of focusing on issues to do with work and potential changes in attitudes, organisational behaviour in this sort of area. And we've kind of gone from people asking us what on earth is a UBI, to it now really in the last few months really taking off, which is extremely pleasing to see. I think one of the problems that we have when talking about the impacts of UBI on predisposition to work is that there is a problem of what is known as incommensurability, because there have been putative kind of UBI pilots around the world, and they've all sort of done different things. A lot of them have got a focus on poverty and poverty reduction, but they're all slightly different in the way that they've been set up, and the evaluations of them have also been quite different. So it's quite difficult to have an equal starting point to work from when you're trying to do an evaluation of what the studies show. So I'm going to be really, really cautious and talk about the things that we really do know in relation to UBI type schemes. I think one of the most important things is to address this idea that a UBI scheme would basically see people either withdraw from the workforce or effectively really not engage very much. A kind of give people money for doing nothing, and they will spend it on private bads rather than public goods. Well, the evidence so far suggests that actually that's not the case, and that impacts on labour market participation have actually been, minuscule. So giving people money has not seen them necessarily disengage to any great extent from the workforce. And when that kind of declining engagement has occurred, it has been more than offset by an increase in jobs, which has resulted has come about as a result in increased consumption. So increased consumption leading to more jobs. Also, the decisions people have taken to reduce their participation in the labour